Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles, along with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Our special guest today is Edith Wiseman. Edith Wiseman is the president of FRANData, a leading franchise marketing research firm based in Arlington, Virginia. As a 20-year veteran of FRANData, franchising is more than a passion for her. The analyzing and understanding of all things franchising and equating insight into results is her calling. Edith plays a vital leadership role in strategic growth of FRANData's performance advisory, strategic marketing, and franchise finance solution. Edith is your go-to person for hundreds of franchisors, top franchise lenders, Fortune 500 companies, and industry partners. So just a few things about Edith. Edith was named by Entrepreneur Magazine as top influential woman in franchising. Edith sits on the International Franchise Association's executive committee on the board of directors. Edith is the chair of the IFA's supplier forum and is also part of the Education Foundation board. Edith remains a strong advocate of emerging brands through her work with Emerging Franchisor Conference Committee and the Emerging Franchisor Task Force. Holy schmoly. Right? Holy schmoly.
Impressive. Very impressive.
Welcome, Edith.
Thank you. This year's IFA was a little busy.
Yes.
Before we get into all the rest of that amazing information about you, I'm curious about how you fell into franchising to begin with.
The word fell into is an accurate description. When you get out of college and you move to the big city, my parents were getting divorced. And so I said, I got to get out of this house. And my girlfriend offered a free month's rent in DC. So I was either going to go join a friend in New York City or come to DC. And my friend in DC sweetened the offer with the free month's rent. So I moved down without a job, without knowing what I was going to do. With a long-term perspective, I wanted to go into the foreign service. So I came down with lots of books that you need to read to go into foreign service because I studied international relations and German in my undergrad. So, but then, I lived with a girlfriend who had a job. And so we would go shopping and we went shopping and charged up the credit card. And I desperately needed money because I had never had credit card debt. And then all of a sudden I had to pay. And then I also had to pay for rent and this car. So I desperately went looking for a job, and all of the things that were non-governmental business related for policy, all paid, I don't know, $15,000 at the time, which was not enough to cover my basic expenses, even though I was living with other people. So this company, FRANData, their research company, and what's the one thing after you graduate from college? You know how to research. That's all you do for 4 years. So they offered me the most amount of money. The CEO at the time, his parents, I think they were living in New Jersey. So we had this random connection because of where I grew up. And so he offered me the most amount of money and I said, sure. And that's how I fell into FRANData. Somehow got stuck in the black hole that is franchising.
Yeah. Oh, I love franchising though. So many stories of how we all get here are so interesting. So you fell into something though that became quite a good fit for you. So call it luck, call it fortune, call it destiny, whatever it is. You definitely fell into something that was perfect for you. So tell us a little bit more about FRANData and what it is about FRANData that gets you excited and passionate. If you could say, this is my passion, and this is why 20 years later, I'm still with FRANData. Tell us about that.
Sure. So FRANData is a franchise-focused market research company. And it has been through essentially 3 iterations, because originally it was owned by the founder sold off to a bank. And then the bank sold it off to one of the senior executives who now owns it, Daryl Johnson. So I'd say, obviously 3 different companies, you get 3 different experiences, 3 different cultures. But over the long haul, the thing that is, first of all, the FRANData culture under Daryl Johnson and actually under the bank as well is a very family supportive culture that is really looking at how do I elevate you as a person, really pushing you along to say, you can do more, you can do more. We believe in you. So like that is I'd say the foundation.
Yeah.
Because you can love the work and not love the company. So the company there, that's how I would describe it. The work, the passion behind the work and why I get up every day and I'm excited to, sign into my teams and get going is that we are able to help people in their decision-making process and very much broaden their perspective so that they, what I found is that everybody sees the world through their own lens of experience. And so everybody has these enormous blind spots when they're trying to figure out, whether it's a franchisor who has an issue that either they're dealing with within the system, they want to change, and they have limited inputs. And so the more that we can bring other options, new ideas, reasons why they shouldn't do something because of the ramifications, after 20 years, you learn a lot about through doing various research projects and learning from others that you quickly know, don't do that. And so it's incredibly empowering to be able to see people's eyes light up. And sometimes even just the questions that you ask, people get off a call and they say, that was like a business therapy session. It's just so that it's incredibly rewarding.
It's beautiful.
It is, the idea that I'm jumping into something, whether I'm a franchisee or franchisor making a big decision or a lender that's looking at what's going on in the economy and what's going on with money and, to have the information at hand and to see it from many different perspectives, which is what FRANData helps us do. It's a gift. In my opinion, it's a gift. You're not just jumping into something not knowing, you're informed, you can make better business decisions, better life decisions, having the data.
Absolutely. And I think I was expressing to you earlier, sometimes I love it when we go out with a project where we're going to companies to say, we would love you to participate in this research project. So for instance, we did one during the pandemic that was about third-party delivery and how franchisors are charging royalties, right? So such an esoteric, very specific thing. But we got over 30 different restaurant companies to participate because guess what? World was changing. Nobody had to deal with this before. And all of a sudden, this was a significant part of their business and had real financial consequences for everybody involved. So like, what's the right way to handle it? Is there's not necessarily a right way until you look at, okay, what are the factors that go into that decision and how are other people considering it? And it was incredible how people responded because they were hungry for that external viewpoint.
Yeah, and hungry for that innovation as well, which kind of leads me to ask you, Edith, how do you feel that you've evolved as a businesswoman? You said that the company went through several iterations. How have you evolved over time?
Well, when, when I think about when I was younger, I was very opinionated, had no screen, had little less empathy for how what I say would impact people. But I think the primary is I've become less of uh, a talker and more of a listener. So I think that's one of the things that I train my people most on. And it's actually one of the hardest skill sets is to just stop and actually be super present with people, hear what they're saying, and really, really hear what they're saying. And don't forget your own agenda. And I mean, you can have your own agenda somewhere back here, but it has to be secondary. And I would say that that's a skill that that has evolved, and I'd say I haven't perfected, but it's evolved significantly when I think about who I was before.
That is great.
Yeah, that's so interesting as you're saying that, especially with social media and 1,000 different ways to communicate today. We,
Mhm.
I think, have lost the art and science of listening. It'll be interesting to see the long-term ramifications of that, right? Because listening is a part of learning and expanding our horizons and seeing other perspectives and even collaborating if I'm the only one that has ideas or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see what does happen, as you pointed out, Tracy, to innovation and ideas and problem solving and collaboration. As a society, we're having more difficulty listening. So it's
It's fun.
interesting you say when you were young, you know, were opinionated, right?
Well,
Yeah,
Right.
I joke because one of my colleagues, you know, he'll start telling me something like, oh, I talked to this customer and here's what their problem is. And then I'll be like, so, and how did they feel about that? And what did they express? And I'll ask and he'll be like, oh, here come the Edith questions.
right, because it's about what was said, but it's also about what wasn't said.
Hmm.
To listen to
Absolutely.
that negative space too, right? Seeing like the positive image, but then there's the negative image within the positive image. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So
so what do you,
listening like you've never listened before, right? What like you said, what's being said that isn't being said, you know? Tracy, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
no, no,
Yeah.
no. I like that you clarified. So, Edith, what do you think it is about your past that has supported you or maybe made you ideal for what you do today with your market research and analysis and training people and caring so much about other people and their success?
Um, so, um, well, when you say that, I do think that that we could spend hours and hours on that topic about the past, but when I try and boil it down to maybe the most salient point is that uh, I've I've always felt that I'm just a slight step behind on everything, you know, whether it be, you know, I'm not the smartest person in the room, I'm not the funniest person in the room, I never had a lot of money growing up. And so when you always feel like you're just one step behind, your desire to, I don't, I won't say that I knew this. I'd say this is more become more clear as time has gone on, especially when you listen to other people um, talk about themselves. And I remember listening to a marketer who said he was terrible at editing and he would never had an eye for detail, but because he knew that, he actually spent so much time focused on that. So I would equate that similarly to me. You know, if I'm going to give a presentation or I'm going to work on a project, like I'm just going to keep going until I feel like we've got the answer or we're prepared enough, or I'm because I can't just give 25%. I can't just give 50%. It has to be, I say I'm either 110% in or I'm zero.
Yeah, like all or nothing.
Yeah.
It
Like you don't
really is.
part ways.
The empathy component and the desire to help others, I don't know that there's, I mean, it's possible that, I suffer from lupus. And so, going through, years of struggle with flares around lupus, you develop a different sense of life and people and purpose. So I think that probably has a pretty significant role in maybe taking the time just to care a little bit more.
Can you expound a little bit? Because you're right, illness does change our priorities, our perspective, how we spend our time, etc. Could you elaborate on that? Because honestly, just that, with or without an illness, is a vital something that makes us, I guess, more present is the only word I can use. But can you expound for us?
Yeah, so I think maybe empathy is something that you develop over time. There may be some of it that you're born with. I don't know, having kids now, you see like there is some stuff that is just there. So it's hard to assign how much is what, nature versus nurture. But yeah, I'm a glasses half full person. So when you wake up every single day and you feel like today's going to be better than yesterday, and like over time, it's not, right? So then it starts to wear on you. But you see people through a different lens because you realize like people don't necessarily know that I'm suffering, and I need to give people that same latitude. Maybe they're suffering.
Mhm.
So, and then you actually care about what they're going through. So, you see people, at the IFA convention, I was talking to a gentleman who is suffering from many different autoimmune diseases. And the fact that he's there at the IFA and then he has a positive attitude and he's going at it, my heart is wide open to him because I know how much of a struggle that is. So yeah, it just makes you stop and think about what somebody else might be going through and then kind of giving them a little bit more latitude than you might otherwise.
Yeah, I think you summed that up beautifully. It makes me think about when somebody goes through some kind of breakup, even, how they say, don't focus on yourself, focus on other people, go to a food bank, help someone out, volunteer somewhere, because you're taking the focus off of, what you don't have and placing it on other people. And it gives you a deeper sense of connection.
Oh, absolutely. I could not agree more with what you just said, Tracy.
Yeah. Wow. This is such a beautiful conversation in our hurried world, in a build empires world and solve problem world, is to have compassion, have empathy, that we really don't know what individuals are going through. Most of us are in some way or another masking it, just for whatever reason, survival, whatever. But that goes back to your listen like you've never listened before. So there's something being said in that body language and the words between the paragraphs or whatever that isn't being said. So just a quick question regarding that. Do you have any tips or tricks for someone who is an A personality, driven, and may not have those compassion, empathy, or listening skills? Do you have any quick tips that might be helpful to someone whose head is always going and body is always going and working towards something?
So when I am training people at my company, I tell them, the moment you want to say something, take a deep breath. So that stops you. And it also resets your whole like physical chemistry. So, and I actually tell my husband this too.
you, honey, but take a breath.
Because he's a big communicator. He's constantly wanting to talk. And I just take a deep breath and have just 3 questions at the ready. How, why, where, right? So if someone's saying something like you just said, how do you handle this? And I could say, well, how might you handle this? Right. So just do a quick flip to stop yourself from trying to railroad over somebody speaking or not taking the time to listen. So those are my 2 quick tips: is take a deep breath and then just have 3 simple questions ready to go so that you take the focus off yourself.
Yeah, that's good.
We could write a book on this, Edith.
Take a deep breath.
Happy to.
I'm going to take a deep breath because my question is actually for Rebecca. Is that her book title? Is that Edith's book title? Listen like you've never listened before.
I think it's never listened before. I think that's the book title.
Yeah, that's the book title.
So I can't tell you how many people I've helped with their book titles and their names of their future podcast, because we get to, to the core. But this is so important because oftentimes we're thinking what we're going to say, what we're going to respond, rather than, do I have the whole picture? What are they really trying to tell me? How can I show them that I am fully engaged and listening? And there's good reason for that. One, sometimes we don't understand one another. And other times, if we're not taking that time, we can't help them, right? We can't provide, in your case, data, research, information, education, because we haven't got to the core of what's going on with them. We've bulldozed them. If we're those A type of personalities.
I'll give a 3rd tip because this also helps. If I always have my OneNote open on my computer, and I've become incredibly efficient at typing very lightly, very quickly, so that when you actually see in written words what somebody's telling you, you digest it in a different way. And so then you can revisit it and say, well, I heard you say this. And that really helps you hone in your listening skills too. So over time, you don't need to do that as much, but I find that I'm addicted to it. I need it. So that you pick up on the subtleties of the words that people choose. So this is random, but for instance, I was at a lender conference this past week, and I was talking to this woman, and she said, I'm going to be an empty nester. And I was like, oh, are you a single mom? And the answer was, well, no, my husband has been very sick, so I've been taking care of him. And it opened up this world of conversation that we would have never had I not picked up on that one little word that made a total difference in what she was actually communicating.
Wow. And likely not just the word, but my guess is you also picked up on tonality and the difference in energy or whatever as she was sharing that. Something along with the word triggered you that there's something more here.
Yeah.
So you were ready with your 3 questions. Okay, let's gather more data.
Right, exactly. But it also leads to better connections, better relationships when you're attuned to those things. And so it's also not having fear to ask the question. Like some people would hear that and be fearful to go down that path of, I'm gonna offend them, or like, oh, that's secretive. My dad's generation was taught you don't go down those paths.
Yeah, my generation.
So he thinks that I'm incredibly invasive. But I feel like that people want to tell things, they just don't feel like they have permission to do so. And so by asking, you give them permission.
Yeah, I think you phrased that beautifully. And you have the empathy, and they recognize that empathetic listening skill in you. So it actually creates the safe space for them to share with you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a beautiful thing. So what's next for you? And when I ask you that, I'm really curious, not only professionally, but also personally. Like, what is next for you?
So I'm pregnant and I'm going to give birth to my second baby. So
Next
as an
step.
older mom, it's a very good question because, I'm 44. I'm going to have two kids under 3. And so priorities are definitely up in the air and changing. And so at this point, I don't have a clear vision of what I want my life to look like going forward. I just know some certain foundations. I need to spend time with my children because they give me unbelievable joy and love. And I say my son and I go cheek to cheek, and I'm like, I could stay like this forever. But I also love what I do and love want to keep growing what I'm doing. So what that exactly looks like, I don't have a clue. So maybe maternity leave will give me this beautiful picture of what life will look like.
Some kind of epiphany, right?
Right.
Post baby epiphany. Yeah. Obviously you're on purpose. You're definitely using your gifting and your talents. You have your priorities straight with, family first, your marriage, your health, all those things. And then you have this love for your business at the same time. So you bring up this topic of parenting. Is there any trends in franchising that FRANData has done some research on in terms of single moms or just parents that have children and how they go into business and what kind of challenges or things that they're going to have to take a look at? Or do most people wait till they're empty nesters and then choose to buy franchises? Is there any research or advice or things that you have looked at as it relates to parents going into business?
So I would say we haven't done a ton of research in this area, but we have had franchisors come to us and want to expand their prospect profile. And one area that has been asked about a few times is women in franchising, women franchisee ownership. I happen to have a former colleague of mine and very dear friend of mine who is a multi-unit franchisee. And one of the reasons she chose this path is because she wanted more time with her children. So it was an expressed desire to say, I'm going to figure out this business to get it to a point where I can take a Friday off and I can leave my workplace at 3 so that I can go pick up my children at school. So it was a very distinct decision after having children to not work for somebody, but to work for themselves. But what I would say we find often when we've looked into women in franchising, specifically franchisee ownership, a lot of times you see it's a husband and wife team that are doing it together. This is very prevalent in the early childhood education business, where they want the public to know, like, this is a family. They have children, like they've done this. They know how important it is to educate your children. So you see these pockets also in fitness, specifically around a lot of women focused fitness, whether it's like yoga or Pilates. You see a greater concentration of female ownership of franchises. And so I think what they're doing is combining a passion and purpose in their desire for business ownership. And some do it when they have children. And then others, like we have another family friend who has a fitness franchise up in Pennsylvania. And she did it after her children were out of the house, feeling like she had more time to dedicate to really growing a business from the ground up.
Yeah.
So those are the things that we've seen when looking into this particular topic.
Even as you're talking, so true, right? Franchising offers an opportunity to parents and women that is more flexible than having to take an hour train to work, an hour train back, leaving our children. I can even think, Edith, of franchisors, women franchisors who created a franchise concept because of their kids. Dory Roberts is an example of that, and a handful of others that we've had on the show. They wanted somehow to have this quality time with their family, and that didn't mean going to a job. So they created a franchise. So
Now, I will caveat that by saying that doesn't happen immediately. So
no.
like, when people come to me and they're like, I'm looking for passive income, what business? And I'm like, well, let's just make sure we're clear about what it takes to have a successful business where you will be afforded that free time. And usually it takes a few years of grinding it and pumping and, putting money in and 24/7. So it takes time to get to that point, but that being the ultimate objective.
Which is good argument then for women, go into business before
Early.
you have babies, right? I would argue that.
Absolutely.
All right. We need to wrap up here, but I'm wondering if you could share with us if there's a top of mind defining moment, or major obstacle in your own life, in your own business, that we could learn from. We, the listener, we, the future franchisee, we, the franchise executive. Tell us about an obstacle or defining moment in your life that gave you an aha or led you down a certain path to do certain things.
I'm like, I guess I'll just pick the thing that comes top of mind. Not sure if this is like the most important. But I think whenever you're giving a presentation in front of a large audience, I remember giving a presentation to Franchise Updates conference, where there were 400 or 500 people, and just not wanting to do it. And really just wanting to punt it back to Daryl. But, so I think when you're on stage and you hear people laugh and you hear people clap, and then you get off the stage and you said, I actually did that. I never, ever wanted to do that. I have no desire to do that again. But it's the confidence that comes with moments like that are defining. And I would say there are lots of those moments that happen on a regular basis. That's probably the most public example of it. But, whenever we're doing a project and it's a challenge and we're not getting the results that we want, and then you have a breakthrough, those moments are just as meaningful in defining your drive and your desire to keep going. We did a project for a franchisor who was looking at 5 different countries. And we needed to get information that was simply not available anyplace else. It was super confidential information. And we had to fly all over the country to interview franchisor executives. And they shared with us this confidential information about how their units were performing in other countries. And, that sometimes is more important than the big presentation, because you felt like what was not achievable actually is achievable.
Wow. Tracy, I know you have a million thoughts about that. I know how your mind works, but I totally agree. When we get out of our comfort zone or push ourselves past where we really think we can or want to go,
Yeah,
that's kind of where we begin to have some exhilaration. We grow, we discover, we whatever. So Tracy, what are your thoughts on all that?
I just think that it's Edith's expertise that she's developed over time, along with your incredible stick-to-itiveness. I mean, that just emanates from you. And when you have subject matter expertise and the stick-to-itiveness, then when you get on stage, you really just care if they get your message. You're not even thinking about, gee, how do I look? And am I nervous? And this and that. Like you are. I have a friend who says, service cures the nervous. And I just see that in you. I just see that. And I acknowledge you for your empathy, your understanding, for your creating the safe space for people, for your stick-to-itiveness. And I really have this super strong feeling that for you, the best is yet to come.
Ooh.
Oh, yes.
Tracy, I like it.
I have a very strong feeling that the best is yet to come.
I agree.
And
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So we're at the top of the hour, Edith. We so appreciate you carving out time and sharing all kinds of wisdom. I wish I would have had my OneNote open so I could have been taking notes. I'm just glad it's recorded because you gave some great advice. So thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you both. You guys are great interviewers and you care about the folks you bring onto the show. So I appreciate your questions and your care around these topics that we're exploring.
It's so fun. And those of you that are listening in to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, thank you for joining us today. Tune in next week for another episode.